So now we're up to our last talk, and we'll have Arham talking about a rule-based indicator definition tool for personalized learning analytics.
Good day, everyone. My name is Arham, and I am a PhD student at RIDT Aachen University, Germany. And my area of research is basically open and personalized learning analytics. And today I am here to present my team contribution or team which is working on a tool, this rule-based indicator definition tool. This is in fact a part of a bigger system we are working on. So since this is our first publication regarding that system, so it is kind of initial paper for this. So moving on, so the presentation, I will be boring you with some introduction stuff, and so that I can pave my way to define what is my aim. And then I will define and discuss some related works, and further then I will dive into the design and implementation, details of the rule-based indicator definition tool, and then concluding it with evaluation and conclusion and future work. Now, starting with the very basic thing, everyone here knows what learning analytics is, so I will be very brief about it. So learning analytics means that to collect the data, evaluate it, analyze it, and report it to the user so that they can improve the learning experience. And there have been many definitions, many explanations for learning analytics, and the one model which I liked is the model which was presented by Amine and Chatti. So he presented a systematic overview of learning analytics in 4 dimensions, and in it he said that learning system should define what kind of data it should be collecting, and why it needs to be analyzing this data, and of course how this data will be analyzed, and finally for whom this data will be analyzed. So these 4 dimensions will be used as a kind of major framework building stone. So moving on, so learning analytics has been there for a long time, but recently with the evaluation of technology and everything, so people are started to learn from not the traditional class environment system. They are starting to acquire the education and knowledge from different sources, like they are using personalized learning environments, they are using more open and self-regulated and self-structured environment, and for example there are you can say applications available and software tools available, like Khan Academy is there, where you can personalize your own learning track, how you're going to learn it. So the learning experience is not restricted to the traditional style learning. So this kind of learning incorporates and introduces new challenges in the learning community, and these challenges needs to be addressed. And of course different people have, since they are learning in different, they have their own structure and their own learning path, so everyone has their own goal, have their own objective, and thus they will need a kind of personalized analytics. So maybe the analytics which I am using for myself will not be useful for someone else. So thus we need a kind of more personalization should be included in this process. So since the field of open learning analytics is very new and it has been introduced recently, so many people has been trying to explain what this term openness means. Some says that there should be open standards which should be there so that different learning systems can interact with each other using interoperable standards and data models. Some says that it should be open source kind of system, so that you have a kind of one system where whoever wants to use it can contribute to it, so that it is personalized according to his need, and multiple definitions are there. So using this definition as a building step, different architectures and platform for the open learning analytics has emerged. So the first one is the Solar platform, which was initially introduced in 2011 by the Solar, and it was the initial concept paper which coined this term open learning analytics. Then this all big players started working on it. This IMS, Caliper, Apereo, and JISC, everyone is starting to come into the field of open learning analytics. So going in the same direction, we at RIDT Aachen University also has been working on a framework for open learning analytics. It's called Open Learning Analytics Platform, OpenLAP. And we try to use the 4 dimensions which Amine, Chatti discussed in the learning analytics, and added the open learning analytics concept to introduce a framework which was published in a paper, in a book called Big Data and Learning Analytics, Big Practice and Theory. I have a name of the book in the references. So the framework has been published, but unfortunately only the hard copy of the book is available at the moment, so you might not be able to access the paper to see the diagram. So since our discussion is not here related to open learning analytics, so I'll not go into the detail of it, but I'm going to say that the RID, the rule-based indicator definition tool, is one of the component of this bigger platform which we are working on. So moving on to the problem statement which we wanted to address, that, like I said, the open learning analytics field is still emerging and it's still in the infancy. So the tools which could provide the full potential of such kind of platform or such kind of system are still not developed or are in the process of being developed. So thus there are many limitations in those kind of tools. And one of the biggest limitations is that usually the tools which are available, they focus in specific set of users. So maybe they are addressing the needs or goals of a student and teacher. Some other tools are addressing the needs of administrations. So these tools are very limited, and so that they cannot be used in generalized for other uses. And also the tools, these tools use this predefined set of indicators, like you have already seen in multiple presentations also, that usually the indicators which are available in the tool have been defined by the developers who are developing it. And they are using fixed data sources, and fixed data is being used in those indicators, and they has been analyzed using special set of analytics method and visualized. So usually in terms of open learning analytics, where everyone has their own goal, their own perspective, or their own targets and needs, so these predefined indicator might not always be useful for them. So thus it will be difficult. And also, of course, if they want to add a new indicator, they would definitely need to discuss with the developers who had developed the tool to add a new indicator, and that's a lengthy process. So this is the problem which we wanted to tackle in this tool, so that the user can generate this indicator by himself. Of course, that introduced lots of challenges, and this leads us to the concept of personalized learning analytic, where the user should be the central entity of the whole indicator process. So the whole process should be user specific, and user should be in the center. And we should adopt a kind of user in the loop approach, so that the user is the one who is in the driving seat of the indicator definition, not the developer who has developed it. Of course, developers should provide a good and infrastructure so that the non-technical users can define their own goals, but that's one of the big challenges that we need to address here. And of course, the process of defining the indicator can be complex, especially for the persons who is not a technically sound, or who is in the different field of education, maybe like mathematics or medicine or anyone else who wanted to use these analytics. So for them, the process should be very simple, and one of the process we thought of using is this goal question indicator approach, where a user first define a goal. Then based on this goal, he has some analytics question when he wants to ask, and this analytic question can be answered with selected set of indicators. So this is the GQI approach that we thought of using in defining our interface and everything. And of course, since we said that the user should be the one who is defining his personalized indicator, so he should be given the flexibility to define indicator for itself. So the whole process of definition should be very flexible, dynamic, so that the user can tweak and change the indicator definition. Of course, we should guide him through the whole process, but he should be in control. And finally, and I think this is one of the most challenging thing, is to define a good user interface. Of course, to generalize something so that a user of different domains can access it and use it creates a big challenge for it. So now this is the, you can say, personalized learning analytic concept that we had for this paper. Moving on to the aim of the thesis. So of course, the aim is to present the conceptual design and implementation detail of our rule-based indicator definition tool, so that a user can flexibly and dynamically generate the indicators. And of course, here we are gonna look into the related work which actually tried to do something similar in the direction of dynamically generating or allowing the user to dynamically generate something. So of course, as far as the domain of learning analytics is concerned, it is not in my knowledge that any specific work has been done which actually allows you to generate indicators. But there are tools available in the other domains and which can help you in defining the interactive flows and define your analysis flows dynamically. One of the tools which I have come across is this analytics workbench by this Gurnet, and it looks something like this. It is a kind of workflow-based tool where you can define your process from start to end, and it uses this pipelines and pipeline design pattern to allow the user to define this flow. So the user can select the nodes from the left-hand side and add it to the visual interface and connect them to have a flow. Similarly, you might all know this very famous tool in the domain of data mining, this KNIME. This is a very powerful tool which allows user to analyze the data. And of course, the user can add from starting to end a different process, how this data will be analyzed, different analysis method can be added, and how this will be analyzed. And they can connect it with this same pipeline architecture to see this, and the user has option to tweak both data and visualization at each step. Similarly, it was the case with the other one. But this will be a kind of difficult for us to use in the personalized learning analytics settings, because those tools were mainly designed to help a user in analyzing the data. So there were data-driven tools, and in our case, the analytics should be goal-oriented, and it should be goal-based, so that whatever is the goal, based on that, then analysis has to be done. And of course, as you can see that from the diagram, that these tools seem complex for a non-technical person to define this tool. So it will be difficult for a non-technical person to use it, and that's why we need a kind of simpler design and simpler interface for the user to define the indicator. And for that, we have proposed this indicator definition tool. As I said, that our indicator definition tool is this component called indicator editor, the red one. This is the indicator editor, is the UI of the whole platform. And if we focus on this one and try to simplify the diagram to give a kind of abstract architecture of rule-based indicator definition tool. So we have this data environment where user is interacting with the systems and doing a lot of learning activities on different platforms, and the data is being collected in a storage. Keep in mind that the data at the moment is separate from the RIDT. So the data collection is being done in the components that you see in the yellow color. So they are not part of the RIDT process. So RIDT is currently using only the data that has been collected already and visualizing it. But I will definitely talk about what kind of data it is there, not how it is collected, but what it is there and how we are using it. So at the moment we have, of course, two types of data. So learning event data, which is the activity people are performing on different platforms, and it is collected in a centralized place. And to store the data in a centralized place, there are already a lot of data models available that, XAPI, IMS, and a lot of things. At our institute, we also have a data model which is called learning context data model, and it was done and worked on by one of our colleagues called Hendrik Thus, and he's working on finalizing his PhD now. So he worked on this user-centric data model in which all events happened by the user are stored as activities are stored as an event with some common attributes like session and what are the categories where the event happened, at what time, and what kind of action was there. And this data model also saves additional parameters or additional information about the event in this entity in the form of key value pairs. So this data model is kind of a comparison, is a compromise between completeness, flexibility, and simplicity. So different models have different attributes. So we plan to use this, and of course the internal RID management data is to store the indicator information, and specification is being managed in the database also. Now moving on to the three main components of our RID. So we'll start with the indicator editor, which is the main UI of the interface. UI. It is an interactive UI of the RID, and it follows a simple goal, question, indicator approach like I discussed before. And in the goal, the first step the user has to set a goal. What kind of analytics he wants? He wants monitoring, he wants prediction, intervention, feedback, and then based on that he has to pose a question. The question can be a quantitative question or a qualitative question, and quantitative questions can be directly answered by maybe one indicator, but the qualitative question can have a kind of multiple indicator associated with a single question. For example, in this case, let's say we have how active are my students in specific class. So activeness can be defined in different terms. So, but each person has his own definition of activeness. For example, two or three possible indicators for this can be that presence rate of the student in the classroom, post rate in wikis, or post rate in discussion forum. But the idea is that everyone should be able to personalize this and define their own parameters of activeness. And of course, in the definition or indicator definition process, the user will be able to explore the data and apply different filters to the data, and then select what kind of analysis has to be done on the data, and then what kind of visualization it has to be done. Keeping in mind that since this is at starting level, so there is no privacy layer implemented yet. So at the moment, all the data is available to the user, but later on the idea is to add the privacy layer so that the data which is intended for teachers or students should be given to them. At the moment, all the data is anonymized and saved and available for everyone. So moving on to the UI, when we submitted the paper to the LAK conference 6 months ago, so we had this interface, and as you can see, it is kind of a clustered interface where everything is put together in one place and alongside. So we till now we have developed and modified this interface, so I'm gonna take the new interface, but unfortunately the evaluation which was done was based on this interface, so the results at the end of the evaluation about the UI will be based on this UI. But to give you the up-to-date version, so I'm gonna show you the current interface which has been modified based on the user feedback, and this we are gonna focus in this presentation. Now I'm gonna show you, this is the whole interface, and I'm gonna give you a step-by-step flow how the user will interact and add the questions. So the first section is to add a goal. Here user can select what kind of goal he has in this. For example, we have this monitoring goal, and then the user will select the question. The user can add a new question, or search for an old question and try to add new indicators to it to have its own personalized question. And then for each question, user can associate multiple indicators to it. And as you can see, there are 3 buttons there. You can add a new indicator from a scratch. You can load a previous indicator, modify it according to your needs so that you don't have to redo all the whole work. And you can also have a possibility to associate and combine multiple indicators to generate a composite one. And moving on, so here you can apply basic filter. At the moment, not the basic filter, here you can specify the basic raw information data which you will be collecting. Okay, the source is L2P, the platform is web, and the category is discussion board. And later on, based on this selected source, you can define different filters. Okay, what is the course room ID, and additional filters which are stored as a key value pairs in the entities. You can also have additional filters like users, sessions. All these filters can be applied here. And then what kind of analysis has to be performed? Since this is a very starting one, we have a counter analytics method which counts the item and display it as an engine. But later on, we have a plan to incorporate more complex methods like social network analysis, data mining, and step by step we'll grow it. And after that, the user can select what kind of visualization he would like to have for this indicator. And then the user will be able to see multiple indicators associated with it in a kind of dashboard form. And then moving on to the rule engine. The rule engine is basically which we are using to map the parameters defined on the interface and generating the concrete SQL or query for which the data will be queried. So we are currently using rule engine, which uses this specific format of rules, and with this we can define the parameters. Based on the parameters, we can take specific action and generate personalized queries for that indicator. What are the benefit of this approach is that we can easily optimize these queries later on. We don't have to update the system altogether. And of course, if we further in the future, if you want to port learning context to some more familiar data model, we should be able to incorporate them with these rules. And of course, if you want to change the underlying architecture, that's also possible to have no SQL things. And of course, indicator generator is the main orchestrator. It manages the communication between the components and external system. It executes the internal whole indicator process, generates the query, executes the query, applies the method, and visualize it. So, and of course, this is a Java-based application, and the whole process, the whole tool is open source. So we are planning to give the GitHub links to, and so that more people can look into it. And for the evaluation, we have done 2 evaluation, effectiveness and usability. Since I said it's an initial tool, so the evaluation was not very extensive. So in the questionnaire, we had a background check, usefulness check, and the usability check. There were only 12 participants. There were teachers, researchers, and the students. And the process was that they were introduced to the RIDT process. They were given some tasks to define the indicator and everything and fill out the questionnaire. And as you can see, these were based on the background. Some of the people, 75% of the people know what learning analytics was, and some of them has already worked with learning analytics. So it is kind of a very starting evaluation, and the plan is in the future when we have a whole system, we will be able to have an extensive and thorough evaluation with others. And based on the usefulness, we can see that approximately 80% of most of the results were more than 80%. The only things which we saw that the people were having difficulties in defining the filters, but like I said, these were based on the old user interface, so there were some design issues also. And the usability, as you say, we use SUS, and the question was to standard question to gauge the intuitiveness. And unfortunately, the figure was that based on the calculation of the results, the result were 53 points, which is less than 68. So based on that, we improved the learning and we improved the UI. And of course, the major issues were the inconsistencies in the UI, lack of feedbacks and responsiveness. And in the conclusion, I think I'm just going to summarize what we did. So it's the same thing which I said before. So I'm going to skip to the future work. So in the future work, the plan is to integrate this UI, improve this UI, add a new component called question analyzer, so that the main question which user has, he can put it, and based on that we can define what are the goals, what are his goals, and suggest what are the possible related question indicators already in the system. And of course, integrate the whole open learning analytics platform, and adding new analytics method, visualization method, provide suggestions, and testing with a larger audience. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Oh, well, I'll ask a question. So we've been trying to build something very similar for our XAPI-based project, and the fundamental problem we always have is the low-level data that's being collected doesn't correspond to your psychological constructs very nicely, right? So if you're aiming this at educators versus learning analytics practitioners, the usability is potentially going to go down even more. So have you thought about how you'll do anything there?
Actually, right now our target audience was mainly the first target audience were the students and the teachers. That was the plan, that we are going to use this analytics tools, embed it in our own learning management system and evaluate there, and later on we going to go with the administration and everything. So but currently I would say we are only collecting data related to the activity footprints inside a learning management system at the moment. We have some additional data being collected outside, but we haven't gone into the discussion of correlating UI and the data together. So, but as I said, it is still an ongoing process and it's evolving very much. So,
just wondering, and that kind of goes for both of you, whether whether one way of bridging that gap might be to make use of the role of learning technologists, which most institutions have to basically do it in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really hard.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's really hard. There are a lot of other issues included, so that some political issues, some university issues, because, and of course, like I said, we have started using the data structure of this learning context data model, which is our own personal developed by ourselves. So there are a lot of discussions and a lot of decisions made based on the place where you're working from. So, but of course, the plan is that later on we should be able to integrate with other systems, and then we should try to incorporate this open standard approach so that we use the same data structure and model so that we can incorporate with others.
John Whitmer with Blackboard. So have you thought at all about, another suggestion, about the the validity. So it seems like there's a lot of power here and the flexibility in being able to create rules for any context in any kind of learning environment. On the flip side, is there a way to see if those rules are right? That is, that you're asking questions and assuming that the person asking the question, what they're seeing actually matters and makes a difference. And I didn't see anything that shows whether or not there actually is a relationship between things like whatever they chose to view and student participation or student grade or anything else in the course. Because if you don't do that, in my experience, often our presuppositions are wrong, right? And so people could be creating rules and looking at things that actually don't matter at all, which is kind of a flip side of the flexibility. So have you thought about how you would approach that issue?
Actually, for a system like this, there is always a cold start kind of problem, so that when there is nothing in the system, you start, if you give it to a layperson, it will always be a mess. So the idea is that there will be definitely a predefined indicators, a very complex and concrete indicators, which everyone is talking about, already available in the system, which will be developed by our learning analytics expert. And then based on that, the students and teachers can build upon those for their personalized indicator, and if they are technical enough, they can generate a new ones and create a complex one. But definitely it is a problem that, of course, when you give a lot of flexibility, and you might not be able to see the concrete result. But our starting idea is to at least give a platform so that the user can generate these kind of things. And the advanced user will be able to generate this. The whole catalog of indicators available in the system will grow, and then people will be able to use it more efficiently. At least that's the plan. Yeah.
Lunch, so that's perfect timing. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for attending the session. And have a good and let's thank Arham.